Eddie Muller. Big hand for him, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Lewis. Okay, how many of you were here last night? Okay, so was it a good idea to program comedy noir? Was it enjoyable?
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. You never know. You feel kind of safe with Preston Sturgis and Unfaithfully Yours, and then you're kind of in uncharted territory with The Good Humor Man, you know. But that, I'm glad, I heard some very favorable accounts of how the audience reacted to that. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about doing these festivals is, you know, we are reviving that wonderful communal movie-going experience, and I'm hoping that there were young people in the audience last night who got a taste of what movie-going was like in 1950 when you would go see a movie like The Good Humor Man and an entire audience would be kind of helpless laughing at the film, right? Which is not really something that I've experienced recently in a movie theater. So I'm very happy that we were able to get that print and that Sony Pictures was able to provide us a really nice print of The Good Humor Man. I'm thrilled about that. So we're going to change track tonight, and we're going to get a little more serious, a little more traditional with our noir. And I kind of make it a point to show as many Sam Fuller movies as I possibly can when I program festivals, primarily because Sam Fuller, who's speaking now from above, and he's a modest man, and he wanted me to stop him. No, Sam Fuller is like a personal hero of mine. When I was an impressionable teenager first getting into films, Sam Fuller movies really captured my imagination. And I met a man who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle named John Stanley, who was a movie critic. And John actually knew Sam Fuller and had correspondence with him. And it just brought films to life in a way that I'd never experienced before. And I was really taken with Fuller's whole life story. And I highly recommend his biography, his autobiography called A Third Face, My Life, Writing, Fighting, and Filmmaking. Because to me, Sam Fuller's life story is like the American 20th century experience writ large, and he exemplifies everything that's great about America. He was a young guy from New York who started working as a newspaper man in the era when newspapers were the king of everything, right? And he was the youngest crime reporter in America. He was covering crime stories when he was 17 years old. I don't know if you're familiar with a silent film actress named Jean Eagles. She was a very popular actress in the 20s, had a very serious drug problem. She overdosed and died in New York, and Sam Fuller was the guy who found her body when he was a teenager. And like a good newspaper man, he did not report it to the police. He went back to the office and wrote the story as an exclusive for his paper, and then he called the police. That man is a newspaper man. He was invited to come out, like many, many writers and newspaper writers and playwrights and things. He was invited to come out to Hollywood in the 1930s to write scripts, which he did with some small degree of success. And then when World War II broke out, Sam, of course, being a patriotic American, he volunteered and he served with incredible distinction in the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. And you know, this is a guy, if you're young enough that you have no knowledge of World War II other than the movies, if you've seen Saving Private Ryan, you know that the first part of that film, it's just a movie, kids. It's the landing at Normandy, the D-Day invasion of the Allies landing at Normandy, and Sam Fuller was there. You know, one of the first soldiers out onto the beach, and he survived. Sam Fuller, was, as far as we know, was the only dog face to run the beach at Normandy twice and survive, because he made it, and then when they said the radio was out, he ran back, cleared the radio signaled in that they could land more guys, and then ran back up the beach. Oh my gosh. And actually survived to have another incredible life story in Hollywood, making films as an independent writer, producer, director in the late 40s and through the 50s and into the 60s. And then, of course, had a whole renaissance late in his life when he was lionized by a new generation of filmmakers who recognized in him that, you know, this is a guy who knows what cinema, pure cinema, is all about. And if you've seen Jean-Luc Godard's Pierrot le Fou, there's a wonderful scene in there where Sam is approached at a cocktail party as him playing himself, and he gives a description of cinema, you know, and he says it's, you know, pain and emotion and violence and blah, 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 you know, war, in a word, you know, it's emotion. Cinema is emotion. And you will see that exemplified, especially in the second film that we're showing tonight. It was an absolutely incredible life that this guy lived, and I will take any opportunity to pay tribute to him. The film that you're going to see tonight, the first film, House of Bamboo, is a very interesting example of the kind of things that Fuller specialized in. Number one, it's kind of a war movie. Everything that this guy directed was kind of a war movie because they were so influenced by his experiences in the military. The actual screenplay is based on a film called Street with No Name. It was written by Harry Kleiner for 20th Century Fox. It was turned into a film in 1948 starring Richard Widmark in the role that Robert Ryan plays in the film tonight. And what Sam did to this was he made it a much more interesting film about the American-Japanese culture clash after World War II. So he envisioned this story, he transplanted the story from an American city to Tokyo and talked about what it was like for GIs who remained in Japan after the war. And you will see that they operate their criminal gang in a very militaristic fashion. And really what Fuller is interested in this film is exploring the clash between these two cultures and where they're similar and where they are dissimilar. And there's a very interesting love story that he throws in there, which he would explore even more deeply in a film he would make a few years later called The Crimson Kimono, that's set in Los Angeles and is about the Japanese experience living in the mainland. The film, of course, stars the great Robert Ryan, who is practically synonymous with film noir. All of his best roles are in noir, and Robert Stack told a very funny story about making this film in Japan, where there was a couple of guys who were there who really didn't take to the Hollywood people being there, and they were drinking in a bar, and this guy called out Robert Ryan. He wanted to fight him in the bar, which was a huge mistake because Robert Ryan had been a collegiate heavyweight boxing champion and was the real deal. He was not a make-believe tough guy. He really was a tough guy. And Stack said it was one of the great things he'd ever seen is that Ryan just faced up to this guy, put his hand on his shoulder and said, "My friend, I love everybody." And turned and walked out of the bar. He was a famous pacifist, Robert Ryan. For as tough as he was, he really was a progressive politically. He was the guy who started the first anti-nuclear power campaign in Southern California. He created the Oakwood School in Southern California, which was a progressive alternative education school where his kids went. He was despised by the John Birch Society, who actually burned a cross on his lawn in Los Angeles and drove him out of LA to New York, where he lived the rest of his life. Little bit of trivia, that the apartment in New York in the Dakota where John and Yoko lived was actually Robert Ryan's apartment. It was actually bought by John Lennon and Yoko Ono from Ryan's children after he had died in the early 1970s. Weird, but there you go. You kind of expect a piece of useless trivia from me when I get out here. There it is. So, that's enough. We're now going to see, okay, last night I showed comedy noir, tonight I show color noir. So I'm very thrilled that we have an excellent print of this film to show you tonight, a restored color print of Sam Fuller's House of Bamboo. So enjoy this, and then we'll see you after the intermission for his masterpiece, Underworld USA. Okay, enjoy. Thanks.